I was selling my old car as I had just bought a brand new one. I posted on a couple of selling sites and Facebook. I had arranged 2 visits that day and I was home alone. It was broad daylight, so I assumed everything would be fine. The first one that came made an offer a little lower than what I was looking for, so I said I would get back to him later as I had another viewing. The guy from Facebook pulled up in a blacked out Range Rover and 3 other guys got out. I opened the car and explained while I was selling it. You know when you just get a bad feeling? I wasn't sure why 4 people would need to come view an 8-year-old car. He asked if he could take the car for a drive. At this point, I was not going to get in the car with him, so I said, yeah, take it. I'll wait here with your friends. He asked me to get in the car with him, and then he said,
What if I took it?
well, it wouldn't really matter. That's what insurance is for. I was not getting in the car with him. The 3 guys left didn't speak to me, just to themselves, and I couldn't understand, but it made me feel very unsure if my car would come back. The car was not worth putting up a fight or arguing over. I was questioning my life choices when he pulled back up. He got out and he offered me the same as the guy earlier that wanted to buy the car for his daughter. He wanted me to get in the car with him to go collect the cash. I said it was fine. If he needed to go, his friends could take him. I had another viewing and I would contact him later. I didn't want to walk back to my house as I had now just decided to sell to the other guy, as they were just giving me the creeps. He then offered me more than honestly the car was worth if I went with him right now. I then said no, and then I locked the car and started walking towards the main street. I had seen my neighbor walking down the street and then shouted to him and his dog. They spoke to each other and then drove off. I texted the other guy and told him the car was his if he wanted it, and he was welcome to come over any time to get it. He sorted and filled out the V5, and off he went. Later that night, the black Range Rover came back and parked outside. I live in a cul-de-sac, so I'm set back to where it had been. I told my husband, and he looked and said that was strange. Then my phone started blowing up. I politely said that the car is gone and it's now been sold, and that I was sorry, but I couldn't help. The car drove off and came back again at about 30 minutes later. This happened about 3 times that night, and I thought it was a bit strange, but I thought nothing more of it as the next few days nothing else happened. On the Friday 4 days later, I finished work early, get back, and get the dog ready to go out. We were going to head straight to the park and run like the wind. As I got to the end of the cul-de-sac, the same car pulled up, and one of the guys jumped out and then said hello. I held the leash tighter and my dog was thoroughly unimpressed. She gave a bit of a grumble and he asked if he could pet her. I said no, she's a guard dog and she doesn't like to be touched, and then we went on our way on our walk. He then grabbed my arm and then my dog bit his forearm. He then started screaming. There was only one other guy with him in the car, and then he jumped out and started to shout. This dog is a very calming and loving dog, and to be honest, it was just a warning nip, as if she had really meant to hurt him, she would have gone through the bone. His friend was shouting and pulling him away. I called her back and I got her to sit. A few of my neighbors came outside from hearing all of the commotion, and they went towards the car. I haven't seen the car or those weird guys ever again, and honestly, I don't think I'll sell anything online again. Not if it means strangers have to come to my home to see it. I'll pass. I was at an Irish pub with my girlfriend one Saturday night. We sat at a booth by ourselves and there were a few empty seats there. My girlfriend went to get drinks at the bar and she feels a tap on her shoulder. She looks to her side and she sees a fat, sweaty guy with glasses and the creepiest smile. He has his eyes wide open and he looks at her and says,
Hi, how are you?
He had quite the uncomfortable presence. We got a sort of delusional stalker vibe from him. She promptly ignores him and heads back to the booth with our drinks. A couple of minutes go by and suddenly the creepy guy proceeds to take a seat in our booth, uninvited. The guy just stares at me with this creepy smile and I get an uncomfortable feeling. I ask him, can I help you? The guy then says to me,
I don't believe you love your girlfriend.
To which I then reply, yes I do. Who are you to?
Show me you love her.
He interruptedly says. I, being a little creeped out, proceed to tell my girlfriend that I love her and give her a kiss, in the hopes that this guy would just leave. Nope. The guy just says,
"That wasn't good enough. Show me you love her."
I then told him, "I don't need to prove to you that I love my girlfriend." To which he then replied,
"Yes, you do. Show me you love her. Show me!"
At this point, I'm more annoyed than creeped out, so I just ignore him, but I stay wary of him. The guy just stares at me for quite a while with this creepy grin, occasionally trying to ask me to prove my love for her. Eventually, I just get pissed off. I'm done being polite. I then ask him in an aggressive tone, "Look, man, can you just leave? Can you leave us alone?" He does, and he goes to the next booth over, creeping on another poor couple. I decided to go out for a smoke several minutes later, and then suddenly the creepy guy appears out in front of me. He had been asked to leave by the bouncers. He just stands there with this creepy smile and tries to hold my hand. The bouncer then came to him and escorted him out. I go back to my booth and I find that a glass had been completely shattered in my seat. Well, the reason the creepy guy had been asked to leave is because he had apparently thrown a glass in the direction of our booth at my seat, thinking I was still sitting there. I wonder what sort of delusional thinking was going on through that guy's head. I'm just glad no one got hurt. So I used to be in foster care, and I went to this program that helped foster youth with employment and GEDs. I normally took the bus to go to my customer service class, but missed it by a few minutes, so I decided to walk. I had done it before with no complications, so I didn't think it was a big deal. As I was walking, I noticed a young man walking down the street across from me. As he made his way down the sidewalk, he was staring at me. He even turned his head to watch me as I passed him, so I was feeling pretty creeped out. Anyway, I started to walk faster because I was starting to feel really uneasy, and the building was about an hour or so away. I thought he would just continue walking, but he actually crossed the street to walk on my side of the sidewalk. He then started following me. I decided to call my boyfriend at the time so I would have someone on the phone with me, but he wasn't able to answer. I kept walking, hoping he would eventually just go away and leave me alone. Man, was I wrong. I had to stop at a red light, and by this time the man had caught up with me, and he forcefully and aggressively grabbed my butt. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of,
"Hey baby girl, how you doing?"
I felt like I wanted to throw up. I remember getting very angry and spinning around to face him and then say, "Get away from me, you freaking creep. Don't touch me." The light turned green and I basically started jogging away from this weirdo. He continued to follow me. I pulled out my phone again to call one of my friends this time, and I asked her to stay on the phone with me. There was a small tunnel that I had to walk through coming up, and this is where I started to feel really scared because I would no longer be visible to the public, and I still had this creepy weirdo following me. After I exited the tunnel, the guy basically ran up behind me and then pinned me against the wall, rubbing his junk against my bottom. I remember screaming at the top of my lungs for him to let me go, and squirming around like a fish out of the water before he released me and threw his hands up in defeat before walking away. My friend was on the phone the whole time this happened, and then I informed her I was going to call the police. As they were questioning me, they informed me that they've had the same exact incidents reported from multiple different women describing the same man. He was arrested, and I'm not sure if he's out now or not because I moved out of state. Thank God. I just moved to a new city. I had a few friends, but I still wanted to meet new people and maybe a cute girl to go on a date with. I began using Tinder, which I had fun with in other cities. I matched with this gorgeous woman way out of my league. Her profile was funny and pretty interesting. We get to chatting and she's very flirtatious and clever, and she let it drop that she went to a top artsy school in France. So I'm intrigued and also thinking she's out of my league. Why she's so interested in me? So I decided to Google her, which is not something I usually do before every date. Usually this will bring up a Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. But when I clicked enter, her name came back with like 125k hits, news articles, videos, etc. Chronologically, the weirdness is thus. As a teenager, she was one of those women who would start up correspondence with serial killers, and had been engaged to two on death row before they were put to death. And next, she was engaged to her 6th grade teacher in her early 20s. He was apparently famous for having falsely claimed to kill John Benet Ramsey. And lastly, she became a high-end escort in this city and had a fairly popular blog all about it. In general, I'm not shaming the sex worker community, but still, it was like sprinkles on the weirdness of this whole thing. After seeing these things, I was intrigued/creeped out by her, and I also found out that she was the adopted daughter of a local billionaire. I decided this crap wasn't worth it and deleted Tinder the day before our date. Well, the very next day, she messaged me on another dating app, asking me if I was still going to meet her for a drink. Definitely not.
So this is being posted because, as the title says, my creeper father has made a comeback. At least he attempted to. Due to his attempt, I was reminded of some of his creepy moments and decided to share some of them. Quick notes. My parents divorced when I was 7. I'm the oldest of 4 children. I'm currently 28 years old. None of us have spoken to him in 6 or 7 years. He recently attempted contact, but none of us were willing to deal with him. I did post a year or 2 back about how his family tended to watch my siblings and I sleep when he visited. They did that for years, and to this day, we don't understand why. I also made a post about his mother attempting to kidnap me from school after the divorce. I intended to post more creepy family antics, but I became busy with life. Now that we are all caught up, let's get to the meat of all this. So my father is, at the worst of times, a mentally unstable abuser, and at the best, a deadbeat dad. After the divorce, we saw him less, and because of this and court papers, his abuse became less physical and more creepy. He would do things like walk in on my siblings and I in the shower or changing by picking the lock. Upon entering, say he had to ask us something. Usually it was something like what we wanted for dinner or if we wanted to go see our grandparents. Things that easily could have been asked through a door or even waited until we were done. I have 2 younger sisters and 1 younger brother. We all grew up very close and at our youngest ages tended to change or shower together so that no one was left alone with Dad. As we grew up, we learned how to keep him out of the room or the bathroom. So we began other things, rubbing my younger brother's inner thigh when he was 4, and talking about how much he looked like our mother. Slapping one of my younger sisters on the butt as she went up to accept a award at school when she was 8 or 9. This stuff became pretty normal, despite our visits being sporadic. When he would focus on making life hard for my mom, he would file with the courts, saying she was keeping us from seeing him, when in actuality, he was never picking us up. When I was 15, we got a call from my father's stepdad, informing us that our father was missing. This was news to us at the time because we hadn't heard from him for 3 years. However, my grandpa claimed that Dad talked about seeing us all the time. 2 weeks go by since Grandpa called. Still no sign of Dad. One day, Mom picks us all up early from school with the news that Dad had been found. We weren't sure how to feel, of course, but that soon changed. When my mom began to drive to an aunt's house 4 hours away, we realized something was going on and asked what it was. Mom said it wasn't the cops who found Dad, it was Grandpa. He had been found half a mile away from where we were living, his car loaded with hunting equipment, though he didn't hunt, and a picture of me and another of my mother. Both our faces were scratched out, and he had been muttering about how to kill us. Now, apparently Grandpa moved Dad in his car, took his hunting equipment, and then phoned Mom about it. Then Grandpa phoned the cops anonymously to go pick up the crazy man outside Kmart. The cops magically found Dad outside of Kmart under severe mental duress, shouting about someone taking his hunting bow set and shotgun. Dad didn't have any of that registered, so they didn't know if he had it or if it was just in his head. They take him in. They have no clue about Grandpa's involvement. Months later, he's released with a bunch of pills to keep him in check. he never takes them. He is granted continued visitation with us, spends the next few years seeing us even more sporadically, but still following reports that my mother never lets him see us. Shows up at my brother's middle school when he's 14, attempts to pull him out of class to take him to go see a prostitute. When my brother refuses to go, Daddy Dearest decides to cause a scene and tries to fistfight my little brother. Campus police get involved, and when Dad is questioned, he informs him that my brother doesn't respect him because of me. My father is escorted off campus and banned. We hear nothing from him again for another couple of years. Then he shows up, demands visitation with my siblings, which the court still lets him have, and because I'm over 18, I didn't have to see him. I was already at a friend's house, so my mom told him she'd call me. He said don't bother. He took the other 3 to see our grandparents. In the midst of berating my 3 siblings and talking smack about my mother and I, my littlest sister stands up to him. Support is given by the other 2 with her, and Dad returns them to my mother, saying I have poisoned them against him. I reach 22. We are called and told his mother is dying. All of us attend. We say goodbye, pay our respects at the funeral, and return to our schooling, lives, and jobs. I get married and don't even get a card from him. Both sisters graduate college. He never shows up to the ceremonies. My little brother graduates high school. Not even a phone call. Last week, he sends 3 out of the 4 of us a Facebook message. None of us have him blocked, but we don't have him added either. My brother received a message saying how, "You know Daddy loves you, and his life has been really hard. I have tried to always be there for you and do what is best. Your mother has always stopped me. She and your older sister hate me. Please talk to me so I can tell you how my life has been." A sister received something similar in phrasing. Neither message asked about their lives. In my message, he says he has stayed away because of me and my request, that even though I have deprived him of interaction with my siblings, he still loves me and wants to tell me about his life. He goes on to remind me that my family was broken up because of me. My marriage is briefly mentioned as, "Oh yeah, you got married. My life is terrible. You need to message me so I can tell you about it," kind of way. When we informed our mother, she told me she got a call from the state where my dad lived, but didn't answer because she wasn't home. She hadn't called him back because, in honesty, she didn't know the number was his and didn't think about it being from him until we told her. She did listen to the message he left. Turns out he just breathed into the phone for a bit before saying her name, my name, and my siblings' names. Then more breathing until the machine cut him short. All of us agreed we didn't want to deal with his creepiness anymore. So Dad, let's not meet again. So I work at a pizza place, usually inside, as my insurance doesn't cover claims when driving for business. But occasionally, I will cover a delivery shift for one of the drivers because the money is pretty good. Our delivery area includes a few new development, upper middle class, cookie cutter neighborhoods, an older 1940s era village, 2 apartment complexes, some trailer parks, and a bunch of rural areas. Not rural to the point seeing hundreds of stars at night, but enough that you probably couldn't hear your neighbors yell. So, about a week ago, I was covering a delivery shift. I come back to the shop feeling pretty good. I'm averaging $5 a delivery, and they have all been pretty close, and check to see if I have any more. I have one to an address I've never seen before. We have mostly semi-regular deliveries, so an address that doesn't seem the least bit familiar is odd. It's out on one of the more rural roads. I asked the kid who took the order what was up, because there were special instructions on the ticket. He says, "They said go around back because the front door isn't operational." I'm like, okay, that's not that uncommon. People often want you to go around back. Either they painted the door, the house shifted and it's a bitch to open, or they're just hanging out back. So, as I'm driving out to the house, I get this odd feeling. I don't really like the idea of going to the back of some house out in the sticks. It would all be too easy for some thugs to order a pizza to an abandoned house. There are quite a few in the more rural areas, and then jump the delivery guy. I figure I'll scope the place out when I get there, and if it seems sketchy, I'll just call them and make up some bull about how it's against company policy to go around the back of houses to prevent robberies. As I'm driving to the house, I realize it's towards the end of this road that gets less populated the further down you go. Great. I'm pretty close to the address and driving slow. I see this abandoned looking house set back from the road with no address and surrounded by a bunch of trees. I think, that house better not be it. So I drive past and check the next house's address, and lo and behold, that abandoned looking one was the right house. Shit. At this point, I'm not super worried though, because out in the boonies, the standards of upkeep on your house are pretty low, so a house in disrepair isn't unusual. So I double back to this house and pull into the driveway. At this point, I'm getting bad vibes. It just doesn't seem right. So I park my car at the very end of the driveway with the rear of the car on the shoulder so anyone passing by can clearly see it. I call back to the shop and tell them I'm at this sketchy house, and if I don't call back in 4 or 5 minutes, call me, and if I don't answer, call the cops. While I'm on the phone, I take a chance to get a good look at the house. It looks extremely abandoned, and not just in disrepair. The driveway is crumbling, bits of gravel, and there are weeds growing out of it. There's no mailbox, no trash cans, no car, no lawnmowers, no landscaping, kids' toys, absolutely nothing in the yard. The yard hasn't been mowed in what looks like years. The house is total crap. The roof is all but falling apart. The siding is falling apart. The back deck, which comes around the side, is falling apart. The only part of the house that looks even a little bit decent is the allegedly non-functioning front door. The windows are all shut. It's 95 degrees and humid, and this place doesn't have an AC. They all have the blinds or curtains shut. The few that aren't are actually boarded up. I don't even see any wires running to this house. It's not dark, but it's dusk, and there isn't a sign of any lights on. At this point, I'm starting to get pretty nervous. I'm a 5'10" male, 180 pounds, not in any great shape, but I did take karate for 10 years, so I'm not helpless. But I do try to avoid any sort of confrontation I can, as I am mostly a pacifist. I'm not too concerned about getting robbed. No skin off my teeth, it's not my money. I mean, I would rather not get robbed, but I'm mostly worried about getting jumped or killed. It's a fairly safe area, but recently, there have been some rather unsavory people moving in from the city. A big spike in home invasions and robberies, but more worrying, a few stabbings and assaults. So, it's time to either nut up or shut up. I'm not just going to go charging in there like a fool, so I get out my phone and call the number they gave me when ordering. While I'm doing that, I'm also getting the pizza out and making sure to leave my door open. A running car, half in the road in an abandoned house with the door open looks suspicious, right? I figure if shit goes down, it might look out of place enough to make someone stop. Not that there is really any traffic this far down the road though. I'm starting to walk up to the house while the phone's ringing. It rings twice, and then an automated message comes on. It says something along the lines of, "This phone is associated with the internet texting app, one of the free ones you download, that lets you send free text from a different phone number over a data connection. I think it was haywire. We've had some issues with people using numbers from those services for pranks in the past. This is a huge red flag. My heart is now pounding in my throat, and my whole body is telling me to bail. I don't want to get a reputation for being a flaky bitch as a driver and lose any future delivery shifts, and that is why I hadn't bailed yet. So, I'm just standing there holding a pizza, looking at this house, but not wanting to venture around to the back of it. I'm hoping that the resident will look out the window and come out by the road to get their food. So I'm looking at the front windows checking for any signs of life. I see a blind go up on the one window next to the front door, and a really creepy looking guy with a hat pulled low and big sunglasses is looking out. Remember, he is in a completely dark house surrounded by trees at dusk. There is no reason for him to be wearing sunglasses. I also see what appears to be a big guy standing behind him in the room. This could have been anything though. When he sees me looking, he mouths something and darts away, presumably toward the allegedly broken front door. At this point, I noped the fuck out. I had stayed pretty close to my car, so it was only a few steps away, and I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the pizza into my passenger seat, something I would never usually do, since I'm really anal about keeping my car clean. I slam it into reverse before I get the clutch all the way in, so I grind my gears a little, again, something I never do. Without looking, I simultaneously slam and lock my door, and floor it backwards onto the main road, slipping my clutch horribly, but at this point I don't care. I don't want to fuck around and risk a stall. I didn't even check for cross traffic, really stupid on my part. I start to drive away and look back at the house. The screen door on the outside of the front door is now open, but the front door is still shut. The guy isn't out in the front yard yelling, "Wait, come back," or anything. He's just gone. So I pull over a little ways up the road to call back to the shop and tell them that I'm all good and I'll elaborate when I get back. The people never call back to inquire about their food. People usually call if their pizza is 15 minutes late, and these people never got it, so it's really strange they didn't call, pretty much confirming they were up to no good. After telling my coworkers about it, we conclude it was definitely a robbery at the very least. So we put the address and phone number on our no deliveries list and ate their pizza. I doubt I would have actually gotten murdered or anything. Robbed, with maybe a gun pulled, or a little roughing up, yes, but it was still very unnerving. That I easily could have gotten into some serious trouble by just doing my job. Especially if the idiots picked a slightly less abandoned house to set up at. Anyone who delivers pizza should be wary of situations like this. I looked into it, and apparently, it's a pretty common way to rob pizza guys. I'm pretty glad that we did not end up meeting. Around March of 2014, I started talking to this girl on Tinder. She seemed cool and fun, and after about a week of talking, she suggested we meet in person. She invited me to this coffee shop, and I accepted. However, the day of, she started messaging me, saying she had to tell me something. Her pictures on Tinder weren't actually of her, and yes, she was a guy. He claimed he really liked talking to me though, and begged me to still meet up with him. Naturally, I declined. I blocked his profile and continued on my life. About a week later, I started talking to another girl. Once again, she seemed cool and fun and we hit it off. She asked me if I spoke to people on Tinder frequently, and, rather stupidly, I told her about my previous encounter with the man lady. Weeks later, I would realize that this new girl was the same girl as the week before. She asked me if I wanted to meet up, and I said sure, as long as it was in a public place. We decided on a cafe, and the next day, I sat at a table waiting. 5, 10, 15 minutes had passed, and she was nowhere to be found. I then peered out the window and saw, from across the street, a man staring at me intently. I looked away, waited a few seconds and looked back. He was still standing there staring. At that point, I left the cafe, got on my bike, I always bike everywhere, and booked it home. I was definitely a little freaked out, but tried to pull myself together, and reasoned that no one could have followed me. I then deleted my Tinder profile, and things were normal for a few weeks. About 3 weeks later, I started getting phone calls. The numbers all showed up as unknown. I picked up the first few times to some guy breathing heavily into the phone. I was already a little freaked out. I stopped picking up any call unless it displayed the caller's name. I then started receiving texts. At first, they were pretty harmless. Calls for attention and begging me to meet in person. It then changed to very sexual texts, until eventually, the messages became threatening, and whoever was messaging me started throwing out my family and friends' names and their whereabouts, saying that he or she would get them involved unless I answered. and because they were texting me, I could see a displayed number. But when I called phone providers, they told me the number couldn't be traced, and that it was probably a track phone. Great. I waited about 2 weeks, not responding to the texts, thinking that I shouldn't feed the troll. But eventually, it became too much. I started getting upwards of 50 texts and phone calls a day. I would wake up to 10 or 20 texts every morning. I then decided to change my number altogether. The texting and calls stopped for a while, but sure enough, it started happening again. I called my phone provider asking if they ever gave out numbers at a user's request, and they said that their policy stated that they wouldn't and couldn't unless valid identification was provided. Then, one day, I tried logging into my Facebook, but I was denied. Within a day, my friends started contacting me, asking what the hell I was doing, saying that they were getting terrible messages from my account. In particular, one of my girlfriends was receiving messages about her mom, who died years ago. I apologized profusely and told people what was going on. I contacted Facebook and explained the situation, and they helped me access my account again, at which point I deactivated it for a while. Enough was enough. I decided to contact the FBI, explaining what had been going on for over a month now. They documented everything, but since I or any of my relatives or friends were in no immediate danger, they probably wouldn't be able to do anything. At that point, I felt stuck. I thought about hiring a private investigator or a hacker. I decided against it, however, and just hoped it would fade out if I never answered. I left my Facebook deactivated and ignored any texts or phone calls. I never had any trouble at home, but some of my closest friends received the occasional text as well, which weirded us all out. I hated that they got dragged into it. One day, I came home and things felt very eerie. The door was unlocked, windows open, and no one was there. I did a check of the place and found nothing else weird, so I locked everything up and just waited for my roommates to get home. It's been almost 7 months now. The calls and texts have more or less stopped. I'll get an occasional text, but at most, one every 2 weeks. At the peak of it, I was receiving almost 100 texts a day. It definitely affected my social and personal life. I became much more wary of the people around me and my surroundings. I just felt like I couldn't really focus on anything until it stopped. Work was difficult, though I tried to maintain my composure as best I could. Everything was just weird. Life was weird. I've since stopped using all forms of dating apps and websites. Things are getting back to normal at this point. I just want to put it all behind me. I'm moving at the end of this year, so it'll be nice to have a fresh start in a new place. I'm not going to sit here and say all dating apps are dangerous and no one should use them, but definitely cover your bases. Ask more questions before meeting someone. FaceTime them first, Skype, anything. I was naive about it, and I regret it. Be safe, stick close to your friends, and try meeting people in more traditional ways. Weird Tinder stalker? Let's not meet. I use Tinder pretty frequently, and it's usually cool. Just meeting people, chilling, smoking with most of them. So I matched with this dude named Charlie, and he seems cool. He's really cute, and he plays music, which is really appealing to me, as I also sing and play piano. We talked for a little while, and I agreed to meet him at his house. Mistake number 1. Why did I think it was a good idea to meet a stranger in their own home? I don't drive, so I take an Uber over, and it's a decent way away, so it's kind of pricey. When he buzzes me into the apartment complex, I get this really creepy vibe, but I shook it off his nerves. I go up to the 3rd floor, and he's standing at the door. Things are cool, we're just chilling. We smoked a couple of bowls and we're watching a movie. So, he makes a move on me, and I go with it. We end up on the bed, and we're obviously engaging in adult activities, when, out of nowhere, he wraps his hands around my neck. Hard. Now, that's all fine and good with me. I mean, I can dig that in the right setting. But alone in a stranger's house when he didn't even check to see if it was cool is not one of those settings. So, I literally can't breathe, and I'm fairly certain I'm turning blue at this point. And he is just relentless. Not only is he asphyxiating me, he's now yelling in my face, "Are you scared?" with this wild look in his eyes. And I'm like, fuck yes, I'm scared. You're trying to kill me right now. I started to struggle, and he was gripping even harder. I'm not even kidding you guys. I seriously thought I was going to die. And by some miracle, I wriggle out of his grasp and start screaming. He's yelling at me to calm down, and I'm frantically trying to put my clothes on. He grabs my wrist as I'm trying to leave, and I use all my strength to pull away and slam the door. As it was closing, the charming fella bid me adieu with the words, "Fucking cunt." I get home and I look in the mirror and I have hella bruises on my neck. I try to cover it up with makeup to no avail. I straight up look like I was almost strangled to death. Then he texts me saying, "I think you need more than one dick." And I'm like, oh really? You want to bring a friend and kill me together? How lovely. Anyways, I blocked him and reported him on Tinder. I wish I could have done more, because I seriously think he would have killed me. I've been debating going to the police, but the bruises are gone, and it's a he said she said thing. But I'm really starting to wonder if I should, because the next girl might not be so lucky. 0 out of 10 would not attempted murder again. Crazy strangler Tinder dude? Let's not meet.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to submit that to my subreddit at reddit.com/r/southerncannibal or to my email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stories. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Heather B, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jonathan C, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Random Randy, Steph L, Tammy S, and Terry H. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always